Selamat malam, Pak Afan.
Malam, Pak Wisnu.
Good morning, Pak Andre Dekok.
Tadi sempat sudah masuk, Pak, beliau. Mungkin lagi istirahat.
Iya, masih timut cuma. Selamat malam, Pak Cucu. Selamat malam, Pak Udi.
Malam, Pak.
Selamat malam, Pak Sigit. Pak, selamat malam. Pak.
Selamat malam, Pak.
Kok kan nama?
Selamat malam, Pak Udi. Dengan Aven, Pak. Iya. Dr. Andre, may I introduce you with Pak Wisnu? He is the president of Center Strategic for Aviation Studies. Pak Wisnu, Dr. Andre.
Good morning, Pak Andre.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Pak Wisnu.
It's nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah. You back in Indonesia?
I'm in Indonesia. I stay in Indonesia.
Ah, okay. So it's evening to you.
Thank you.
Even also Pak Udi Tito. Selamat malam, Pak Udi.
Selamat malam, Pak Bezena.
Selamat malam, Pak Udi.
Selamat malam, Pak Wisnu. Apa kabar, sehat, Pak Wisnu?
Alhamdulillah sehat.
Alhamdulillah. Halo, Andre. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you, Udi.
Nice to meet you, Pak Andre. I'm Udi Tito from the DGCA Indonesia, from the Director of Aircraft Airworthiness and Aircraft Operations. Yeah.
Okay. Great. It's a nice job to be.
Jangan lihat lagi. Good morning, everybody. Selamat malam, Jakarta.
Malam.
Kembali kita dengan Center Strategic for Aviation Studies and Permanent Delegation Office Indonesia to ICAO. Together, we are going to present webinar discussions with the title of the ICAO roles in aircraft accident and incidents, to session webinar with Dr. Andre de Kock. Gentlemen, previously I'm going to greet Dr. Andre de Kock. Good morning, Dr. Andre.
Good morning.
Also together with us, we have some experts who are going to be the respondents of this webinar. I'm going to greet good morning. Selamat malam, Pak Suryanto.
Selamat malam, Pak.
Okay.
Good night.
Also, I'm going to greet another observer, Mr. Uditito. Selamat malam, Pak Uditito.
Selamat malam, everybody. Selamat malam.
And also, we are going to invite Captain Nur Cahyo Utomo. Selamat malam, Pak Nur Cahyo Utomo.
Selamat malam, Pak. Good morning, Andre.
Good morning.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much for joining with us in this webinar. May I give some information that according to the plan, suppose Pak Indra Gunawan from Directorate of Air Navigation joining with us because of some certain reasons and a new assignment he has to go and cannot to join with this webinar. And for information, this webinar, in this webinar, the registered participant is 782 participants joining with us, not only in this Zoom, but also we provide with YouTube. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the webinar, may I invite the CSS for the rules for these discussions. CSS, please, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Afan. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to tell you about policies and procedure on this webinar. The first, for optimal viewing, access the webinar using a computer with a high-speed internet connection and audio speakers. If you attend the webinar by only using the phone option, there will be insufficient data while you attend our webinar. Make sure that every participant device on mute mode their microphone upon entry our webinar. We will give some participant time to take some discussion with the panelists by asking some questions. All participants can put their question in Q&A column. CSS will provide the panelists contact information after the webinar ends. CSS will send the participant certificate by email after the 2 sessions of webinar ends. Untuk hasil yang optimal, akses webinar akan kami dengan menggunakan komputer dengan kecepatan internet yang tinggi dan audio speaker yang baik. Jika Anda memilih opsi untuk menggunakan smartphone, dikhawatirkan penggunaan data yang dibutuhkan tidak mencukupi selama kegiatan webinar berlangsung. Dimohon agar perangkat setiap partisipan berada pada mode diam ketika masuk ke dalam webinar kami. Kami akan memberikan partisipan waktu untuk dapat berdiskusi dengan panelis. Bagi seluruh partisipan yang ingin mengajukan pertanyaan, dapat memasukkan pertanyaan di kolom Q&A. CSAS akan memberikan kontak informasi panelis setelah kegiatan webinar selesai. CSAS akan mengirimkan sertifikat peserta melalui email setelah kedua sesi webinar selesai. Tersebut adalah aturan dan prosedur dari webinar ini. Terima kasih untuk seluruh peserta yang hadir tepat waktu. Saya kembalikan kepada moderator, Dr. Avancena.
Thank you, Mbak Sela. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we start with the main agenda, the presentation of Dr. Andre de Kock. So may I introduce Dr. Andre de Kock? CSS, please the slide for the CV of Dr. Andre de Kock. Dr. Andre de Kock, the Secretary of the ICAO Accident Incident Investigation Panel and the Flight Recorder Specific Working Group. Previously with a lot of experience, accident investigation and prevention sections in ICAO, and previously also the aircraft accident investigations in South Africa, Civil Aviation Authority, and a lot of more experience. So, to Mr. Andre de Kock, so we have, according to the rundown webinar, we have in here, we have 1 hour presentations for you to give. Mr. Andre de Kock, the meeting is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Let me just get to that screen there. And I'll share it there. Hope it's good there.
Okay, good.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure exactly where all the people are, but I guess most of you is good evening. Here from Montreal, it's morning, and it's a hot Montreal, different than what we used to. But anyway, so let's get to the ICAO role in accident and aircraft accident incident investigations. And I'll take you back, right back to where we start with, oops, let me just get to that. I'll take you back to where ICAO started. And actually, ICAO is a United Nations part of, as a part of the United Nations. So back in the 1940s, at the end of the Second World War, the people realized that there will be more and more passenger aircraft flying all over the world. And because of the developments that happened before and even during the Second World War. So they came together in Chicago and eventually signed the Chicago Convention on the 7th of December, 1944. And in that Chicago Convention, the development of an international civil aviation organization was developed in the convention. Now, the convention is interesting enough. It is the member states agreeing to take part in civil aviation in a structured way. So only on the 3rd of October 1947, the actual ICAO was really became a UN specialized agency. Prime objective, development of international civil aviation in a safe and orderly manner. It wanted to be a safe manner for anybody to fly from a state to another state and be able to do that safely with certain standards that is and recommended practices that is imposed on all the states. And it's not really imposed, it's really agreed to. And I'll tell you more about when the annex is developed. And so this is the main concern, or the main objective was on that basis. And then ICAO's core mandate, and it was set then, and it's basically still today, was to help states to achieve the highest possible degree of uniformity in civil aviation organizations on the regulations, the standards, the procedures, and the organization as such. So each state is sovereign in its own, because ICAO provide the standards and the recommended practices and so on in the annexes, and we have guidance material and those, but the state then capture that into their own regulations and legislation to be able to get this in uniformity in all over the world. Then the convention consists of certain articles. There's several articles. Some deals with aircraft airworthiness, some deals with operations, some deals with the type of aircraft that is concerned, and some deals with aerodromes and air traffic management and so on. The one article that we're concerned about in terms of aircraft accident is Article 26, and that's the article, that's the basis in the convention for states to investigate accidents and incidents, and to make sure that we do it in an orderly and a well-developed method all over the world. And then the other one that I just wanted to highlight too, and that's the Article 3, which says that the convention shall be applicable to civil aircraft and shall not be applicable to state aircraft. And what they mean by state aircraft is aircraft used in military, customs, police services shall be deemed to be state aircraft. Now, what's interesting here is that many states do have different investigation authorities or investigation units or whatever they call them, bureaus, for military, customs, police services, and another authority for civil aviation aircraft. But it depends on the state. We have major states where there is one unit which does civil and state aircraft, which do military and so on. And I have an example, like, for example, Brazil does both. They have CENEPA, and CENEPA deals with both civil and state aircraft. But that is the structure of that state. But most of the states tend to take the civil aviation aircraft separate because of the fact that military has got their own set of rules and so on, usually under different military legislation and regulations and so on. So most of the states in the world split and have a civil aviation accident investigation authority, and on a different scale the others. Then there's, just roughly to give you an overview, there's 19 annexes at this stage. Annex 13 is obviously accident and incident investigation. Rough groupings would be 1, 6, 8, 14, 18 is typically operations. 1 is, for example, is the licensing. 6 is operations of aircraft. 8 and so on and so on. 14 is aerodromes and that. And then 2, 10, 11, 12 and so on is 80 air traffic management. The one that came out last in the line is Annex 19, which is the safety management annex. And that kind of covers most of the operationals and the air traffic management systems. Now, all the annexes, and I'm just going to run you through Annex 13, and I'm going to give you a wide, can I say, insight into the annex. But I'm also going to concentrate on what's new in the annex. So in this presentation, we will have a quick look at some of the, can I say, the important points, because that's usually what I find that states have a bit of a difficulty in. And then we'll also have a look at what's new in Amendment 17 and Amendment 18 of Annex 13. Just for the sake of interest, let's get to these ideas of amendments, because the annex was originally, this Annex 13 was originally adopted way back in the 1950s. So from 1950 to current state, there has been 17 and just there is for this year 18 amendments. That means the states get together in different ways, and it's the states that tell ICAO that we got something that's not in the annex, or we got something that is not clear in the annex, or we got something that we need to tweak a bit. So this process used to happen by what was known as a divisional meeting. Now, these days, we have the accident investigation panel. And the accident investigation panel generally meets once a year. Unfortunately, this year we would have met in May, and unfortunately we were unable to travel and so on. But we'll see as soon as we have the opportunity, we'll meet as an accident investigation panel. The accident investigation panel is a group of experts nominated by states to do that process of, hey guys, there's something wrong in this definition, or there's something wrong in this part of the annex, and we need to twig it, we need to add something, we need to, and you'll see how I'll explain how that happens. The first part of the annex, and that's most of the annexes, the first chapter deals with definitions. So what I want to do is I just want to touch onto the definition of accident, because that is usually a definition that is difficult to categorize once the occurrence happened. And I want to call it the occurrence because the occurrence could be an accident, it could be a serious incident, or it could be an incident. The annex is known, or the title of the annex is Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation. So it covers both, but it depends on the states how it's arranged. So just to start off with this accident definition, and that's the first definition in the annex. There's two major parts to it after the introduction. So in the introduction, the first part is it starts off with saying an occurrence associated with operation of the aircraft. In the case of manned aircraft, that takes place between the time any person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight until such time as the person has disembarked, or all the passengers is disembarked, or whatever the case might be. So there's a definite time period for an Annex 13 investigation from the time the first persons board the aircraft with the intention of flight, because many times there's people board the aircraft for other intentions, cleaning the aircraft, maintenance, all that. If there's an accident during that time, it is not deemed to be an Annex 13 type of accident. So that's the first part. And then obviously there's the unmanned aircraft, which is a different story, and I'm not going to touch on to that at the moment. But then there comes two parts, where the one part has got to do with the persons, and the other part has got to do with the aircraft itself, the machine. So on the one part, if we want to categorize this occurrence, and we have a fatality, a person that is fatally injured or seriously injured, either being in the aircraft, contact with the aircraft, jet blast, all that. That two parts, fatal or serious injury, is the part that we're looking at. Then there's a few except causes right at the bottom, which means that it's for natural causes and so on. Somebody on the aircraft having a heart attack, that's not an accident. But then there's also, on the other side, if the aircraft sustains damage or structural failure, which adversely affect the strength of the aircraft, there's a serious major repair that needs to be done, and so on. So that's the two parts. And what we're looking at when an occurrence happens, as accident investigators, to categorize it as either an accident or an incident or serious incident, would be these two parts. Is it fatal accident? Is there a fatality? Is there a serious injury? For serious injury, there's a set of there's a definition, and there's a set of rules for that. And then on the other side, is the aircraft totally destroyed, or is there substantial damage? And again, for substantial damage, there's a description to that. Then there's also this part here, which has got the except clauses to it. And that is except when whoops, let me just go. Okay, there we are. the except clause has got to do with the engine failures and those kind of things. Single engine, when the damage is to the propeller, the wingtip, antennas, probes, vanes, tires, brakes, so on. So in that cases, it would not be categorized as an accident. And then the third interesting part is when the aircraft is missing or completely inaccessible. And again, there was a kind of a play around again with MH370, and we're all familiar with MH370, which to this day is nobody has ever found it, I guess. And there's many others of these airplanes. Just be careful. It's not just MH370 that got lost. There's several other airplanes that we have on the register, Beech 1900s and so on. And that's just in the last few years. Before that, there's even more. But anyway, so the point is that if the aircraft is missing for a period of time, which we're fairly sure that there's no chance of having anybody rescued, then it becomes a missing aircraft. Then we have, on a lower level, when it comes to an incident, and that's an occurrence where it's associated with the operation of the aircraft, but affects or could affect the safety of the operation. Now, many of the states, many of these incidents is investigated by the safety management system. Then we have, on the other hand, it's an incident, but it's got a higher level of possibility of an accident. And the definition, just in the first few words, one can find out that an incident involving a circumstance indicating that there was a high probability of an accident and associated with the operation of the aircraft. And that's much the same as the introduction to the definition of an accident, but the difference with that there is a high probability of an accident. And this judgment deal has got to do with the investigators themselves. They have to put this together and say, okay, so how can we categorize this? In which category? And in this case, because there was a lot of discussion in terms of, okay, so is it now going to be a serious incident? Is it a high probability? Well, okay, let's do a attachment to the annex, which deals with categorizing serious incidents. And if you page back into the annex, attachment C deals with just that, to assist states to be able to put the categorization either in a serious incident or just, oh, this is just an incident. Or no, guys, this is an accident because that for the fatality, the serious injury, the destroyed aircraft or the substantial damage happened. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to step through a few, and I'll show you a picture, and I'll let you think about it. That is an Hawker Siddeley 748 against the mountain. So, yeah, that's definitely an accident. We can see that there was fatalities, and the aircraft is pretty well broken up. Now let's go to the next one. This just happened the other day in Somalia. This is I think it was a Dash 8-400. And we can agree that this is an accident. The airplane is going to be destroyed. This one is where the interest comes. This is also an accident or occurrence that happened just not so long ago, a few about a week or two ago. Now this one, they were unable to extend the undercarriage, ended up that landed on the belly of the airplane. So now we get to that fine line of what's the damage of the belly of the airplane. Is there structural damage? I see that there's damage to the propellers. Well, the except clause on the accident say that damage to propellers doesn't make it necessarily an accident. And so in my experience, what I found that on the initial assessment, one would think this is a serious incident, but wait until they put it on the jacks in the maintenance hangar, and then we can go and have a look whether there's structural damage to the belly. Here's another one. This is a undercarriage collapse. The right-hand undercarriage, the aircraft landed, normal landing, but during the run out, the undercarriage, the uplock tore out and the airplane ended up like this. Again, this is very close to, is it going to be an accident or is it just going to be investigated as a serious incident? And remember, one may change the categorization along the way. We do see that happens, that there's a notification of a serious incident, and then later on it gets upgraded to an accident investigation, or otherwise it's the other way around. There's a notification of an accident, and then it gets degraded or recategorized to a serious incident, and that depends. Sometimes in these cases, I've found that because of the aircraft pushing up against the wing, that the wing gets bent, and then it's much more concern. This one happened also not so long ago. The airplane, I think it was a 737, taxied past the back of the other airplane, and what's lying on the ground there is the auxiliary power unit, the APU. Took out the whole APU out of the back. So that could typically be a serious incident, but it could also be upgraded to an accident. This is an interesting one. This happened in Russia, and this is a 737 landed, and during landing there was a person on the runway, and the aircraft impacted, or the engine there, you can see the damage to the engine, impacted the person, and the person was fatally injured. So there we have the concern that it's a fatal injury. The person was in contact with the airplane was in operation, there was passengers on board, it landed after a normal flight. So this will typically be an Annex 13 accident investigation. Now there's another interesting investigations that happen, and I noticed there was 2 of the NTSB reports that was reviewed just a week or 2 ago, and that was cabin crew being injured, seriously injured, by spilling hot liquids on themselves. The one accident was a turbulence event where this hot boiling liquid was spilled on this cabin attendant, and the cabin attendant had second-degree burns, and because of the second-degree burns, that pushed us into an accident. So there was no damage to the aircraft, absolutely no damage. And only because of the injury to the cabin attendant, this had to be investigated as an accident. And it was investigated as it's a fairly short report, but that's the case. And there was another similar occasion where there was also a spill. In that case, it was somebody that came out of the toilet, opened the door against the cabin attendant, and the same thing happened. So that's kind of the strange ones, where one has an accident and the airline just really don't want that kind of accidents against their records. So another more recent part that was added to the annex, and this was the Accident Investigation Authority. Now it came out in two parts. We first had to put in a definition on the one side, but on the other side also the standard. And the definition dealt with the Accident Investigation Authority that needs to be designated by a state as responsible for accident investigations or incident investigations within the context of Annex 13. And then the standard was for states to establish an accident investigation authority that is independent of state aviation authorities and other entities that could interfere with the conduct of the objectivity of this investigation. So that was the standard that came about, and it was a long discussion, and it was really a very sensitive discussion, because many states do not have accident investigation authorities that's independent of the state authorities, and the international community agreed that yes, we need to have this, and that's how it came about. And because of that, we also had to then modify or amend the accredited representative definition, because the accredited representative definition, and let's just get back to accredited representative, and I'll cover more about that in the investigation part. The accredited representative needs to be from the state accident investigation authority. Now, it used to say that where the state has established an accident investigation authority, well, in this case, the annex cannot contradict itself. So the amendment was to say that the accredited representative would normally be from the state accident investigation authority. And that you can see how the amendments come about to improve the annex as one goes along. Okay, then getting further into the annex, chapter 2 is the applicability. And this is the part where what applicability there is for Annex 13 in occurrences. And now, the interesting part to this applicability part is that it says applies to the activities following accident and incidents wherever they occur, or wherever that occurred. And that is kind of the world coverage of wherever an aircraft accident or incident occur, that there should be some kind of investigation. And then the objective of the investigation, and this one is quoted fairly often, and I think most of you has probably heard it before, that the sole objective of the investigation of an accident or incident shall be the preventative or the prevention of accidents and incidents, and not the purpose to apportion blame or liability. So generally what happens is that there's when an accident or incident happen, that there's and there's a decision or there's a institution of an investigation according to Annex 13, there's certain Annex 13 rules that kick in. That doesn't mean that there's also an investigation by the operator. It doesn't mean that there's also an investigation by the judicial authority, or it might be an investigation by the safety management part of maybe the aerodrome or whatever the case might be. But when it's an accident investigation according to the Annex 13, then that rules apply. And that activity needs to be not to apportion blame or liability, in order that in the future, this safety information will still be available for the prevention of accidents and incidents. And that's a very important part, that there needs to be a trust in the state that the Accident Investigation Authority would handle the information obtained during the investigation in such a way that it is protected and that there would not be blame or liability from the Annex 13 investigation. Okay, and then we get to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 deals with notification. So when the accident or the incident, well, usually the serious incident happen, the states need to notify each other of this accident. Okay, so who needs to notify who? Well, let's get to it. If the accident happened in state X, let's call it Indonesia in this case, then the airplane that was involved in the accident, in your case, it was a Boeing 737. It was registered in Indonesia. So state of registry needs to be notified. Well, we are the state of registry. The state of operator needs to be notified. Well, we are the state of the operator. The state of design needs to be notified. Well, the state of design is actually United States. Okay, so that's another state. The state of manufacturer, oh, well, that's also United States. So the notification has to go out to the United States NTSB, because they're the Accident Investigation Authority of the United States. And they then represent the state of design and the state of manufacturer in this investigation. And they would then typically be able to send accredited representatives and advisors and so on. And then the last one for the notification is for ICAO. And that is for 2,250, or can I call it the maximum certified takeoff mass of the aircraft is above 2,250, or turbo jet powered airplanes. And now you'll see that there's red text here, text changed. And that is typically an amendment that's taking place, or it's coming into being by the end of November 2020. And this is if it's an incident to be investigated within the context of the annex. Now, what happened is that further down in the annex, once the investigation is completed, the final report is coordinated between all these states, the state of registry, operator, design, and manufacture. But then we found that some states had instituted an investigation into an incident, but has never notified the state of design, for example, or the state of manufacture. And then suddenly the state of manufacture or the state of design receives a final report or draft final report for coordination purposes. And they didn't even know that that incident happened. So this is an amendment to the annex to institute this part, and this is a standard for the state that investigate an incident according to Annex 13 would then notify the other states too. Now, the notification also is part of the initial start of the ADREP reporting, and I'll get to ADREP reporting a bit later on. So what's the responsibility of the state of registry, operator, design, and manufacture? Well, they have to now respond back to the state of occurrence to let them know what their plans are, whether they're going to appoint an accredited representative, whether they're going to travel to the accident site, or is it going to be a non-traveling accredited representative, and that kind of things. Then at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that when in a territory of a state of registry, in a non-contracting state, and outside the territory of who institute the investigation. And that's a very interesting question. So let's get to that. So the state of occurrence, according to Chapter 5, needs to institute investigation into all accidents, into serious incidents when the aircraft of maximum mass is over 2,250. But they can also delegate investigation. And that's in Chapter 5, 5.1, that's kind of thing. But then when an accident happens in a non-contracting state, the state of registry will need to deal with the non-contracting state to be able to do the investigation. And that's the requirement. Also, outside the territory of any state. And that's when the aircraft ends up in the high seas, middle of the Atlantic Ocean, middle of the Indian Ocean, wherever the case might be. The state of registry is obliged to do the investigation. And we have examples of that. For example, Air France 447, it was a French airplane, ended up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the French BEA investigated that accident and eventually had to recover all the flight recorders and some of the parts of the airplane and so on. So that was a French investigation eventually because of the state of registry of the airplane. So that's how the annex deals with instituting the investigation. Now there was and this is in red because this is new to the annex. And this is in the latest amendment. And this is a problem that existed where the state of occurrence does not institute or conduct an investigation. So many times it's either the state of the operator or the state of registry or the state of design or manufacturer, and in some cases is actually the manufacturer of the airplane that needs to somehow get more information on the one side, and on the other side, that information needs to be made public. So if the state of occurrence do not institute investigation, one of the other states, and in that order, state of registry, state of operator, and so on, may make a request and should institute and conduct the investigation with such information as is available. Now, many times it happens that flight data and those kind of things is available to the state of manufacturer, and they want to then do some further investigation. The important thing here is that this state, whether it's the registry or whether one of those states, have to make, or they're entitled to request from the state of occurrence to delegate that investigation. But if the state of occurrence does not give consent, that's it. State of occurrence needs to carry on with that. Then I put an NB there at the bottom, which says the two associated notes. And one of the notes is that even if the state of occurrence did not or gave consent or did not reply in 30 days, the state that's making the request may not go to the state of occurrence because they may not enter the territory of the other state. Remember, the state of occurrence is still a sovereign state. So there's a very interesting part in that needs to be very carefully handled. And then the second one is the state of occurrence is always the state that needs to investigate the the accident or the serious incident. Okay, in chapter 5, if we go a bit further, the Accident Investigation Authority have the independence in conduct of the investigation. And this is where the whole idea came in, that the Accident Investigation Authority needs to be an independent authority to investigate the accident. Now, there may be a case where there is an investigation or there's an accident where, let me call it, the crop spraying, the agricultural airplanes, they have accidents on a regular basis. But that accidents happen because of the way they operate. They have to be low level working. So if the state decide that this accident that happened will be on a low level investigation, and that means they will get in as much information as they can, but may not do a full accident investigation according to Annex 13. The Annex provide that opportunity in Chapter 5. Then just getting further into some of the other parts of Chapter 5, there's the standard for separate judicial and administrative proceedings. There's the investigator in charge has certain designation, and that investigator in charge should have access and control over the accident site and over all the evidence related to the investigation. There's also now been a little bit of a change in the standards in terms of flight recorders and ground-based recordings. Now, flight recorders on the one side in the current Annex is required to be downloaded as soon as possible. And that happens in different ways. Some states do have their own flight recorder lab to download flight recorders. Other states do not have their own flight recorder lab, so they have to take it to another state and so on. And now these days there's also ground-based recordings because more and more flight data will be transmitted to the aircraft, from the aircraft to the ground. And then the final reports, just to get to that, there's a final report in the chapter 6. A state needs to release a final report, make it publicly available, and so on. But there's also, in the same line as the other discussion, that if a state does not publicly release a final report, then another state may request that there will be a release of a statement containing safety issues raised from the information that's available. Now, this is that's a bit more difficult situation, but that happens when there's an investigation instituted by state of the occurrence. There's a certain amount of investigation happening. The different states was participating, but then over a period of time, no final report gets released. And this recommendation then provides for a state to request from the state of occurrence to release certain safety information. And I'm not going to go too much detail. Safety recommendations, what's new there? This is just a note that's added where it says that nothing in this standard is intended to preclude the state conducting the investigation from consulting with the other states on draft safety recommendations, because sometimes if this is not consulted with the other states get surprised by a safety recommendation that they never expected. And there's a little bit of an interesting thing that generally a note sometimes in a latter amendment becomes a recommended practice, and then later on becomes a standard. In this case, this was a note, and after a long discussion and coordination, this note was upgraded to a standard. And well, it gives the entitlement to issue a safety recommendation after coordinating with the state conducting the investigation. And this is another state issuing a safety recommendation, because generally the state of occurrence would issue a state safety recommendation, but in coordination with the state of occurrence, another state which was participating in the investigation would be able to issue a safety recommendation. Then attachments, there's several attachments to the annex, Annex 13. In the case I mentioned, the one attachment is C, which lists some of the serious incidents, which is typically serious incidents. And notice that if you read it, you'll find that it says it's typically serious incidents because it depends on the conditions, what happened in the occurrence, and it depends on the investigators when they do the investigation, whether they're going to categorize that as a serious incident or maybe just as an incident. And then attachment F is a new attachment, and that deals with the delegation agreements. So in many cases, states do their own investigation, but there is cases where the state delegate the investigation to another state or a regional accident investigation authority. And this guidance in attachment F is for this agreement between the state of occurrence and the delegated the state where the investigation was delegated to. And then there's also a new amendment that's coming in terms of the safety recommendation of global concern. And on the one side, it's a definition of what the safety recommendation of global concern is. And that's typically, and I can give you a kind of example with the 737 MAX, where the global industry very quickly realized that there was some deficiency in this design of the airplane that would have significant consequences on a global level because of the use of the aircraft globally. And so this is the typical example of a safety recommendation of global concern. And then ADREP reporting. Now, ADREP reporting, I said that notification right in the beginning is part of the initial, can I say, kickoff of the ADREP reporting. But Chapter 7 also gives clear requirements in terms of a preliminary report that needs to be addressed to ICAO for aircraft accidents above, with the aircraft above 2,250 kilograms maximum certified takeoff mass. And that preliminary report is then circulated to the states participating and ICAO within 13 days. Now, this preliminary report is in fact, the notification is very quick after the accident, but in 30 days, many of the bits of information is cleared out. And then in 30 days, one will have a much better picture of what happened, and that information that is released will then be cleared out and much more accurate. And then lastly, the accident and incident data report is after the investigation is completed, then that is sent to ICAO. Excuse me. Now, I do congratulate you folks from Indonesia, because you kicked in a most interesting discussion in ICAO in terms of this ADREP reporting. The working paper that you submitted to your regional discussions there in APEC, and then it came through into ICAO, and the Commission is now in serious discussions on where and how this ADREP reporting is going in ICAO. So thank you for that. Then what is further developing in Annex 13? Well, we only have a very short little bit on unmanned aircraft systems. And in fact, Annex 13 was one of the first annexes that included some reference to unmanned aircraft systems. But at the moment, there's, by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Panel, a proposal for standards and recommended practices, which expand the investigation of unmanned aircraft systems. And this was coordinated with developments related to the remotely piloted aircraft systems in Annex 8 and Annex 6. And because of the developments there that's still ongoing and that's finalized now, this was taken back a bit so that we can follow in a proper order. And one of these days, this will be further discussed, and there'll be amendment for unmanned aircraft systems in a much more practical way in the Annex 13. So thank you. That is my presentation. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Andre, for your quite impressive presentations of Annex 13. And in this webinar, we have some experts from Indonesia NTSC and also from Indonesia DCCA to give some response to your presentations. Dr. Andre, please, could you please switch off the, okay. Okay. We are going to invite some experts to have some response according to Dr. Andre's presentations. The first response, I'm inviting for, 1 second. For the chairman of Indonesia NTSC, Dr. Suryanto Cahyono, to give your response according to Dr. Andre's presentations in 15 minutes. So this is the curriculum vitae of Dr. Suryanto Cahyono, chairman of the Indonesia NTSC. Dr. Suryanto Cahyono, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, the moderator. Good night, good evening, good morning to everybody. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Andre de Kock.
Pak Suryanto,
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It was like your camera is like close by your head. Sorry. Okay, Pak. Good, Pak. Go.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you for your presentation about the Annex 13. Yeah, we have follow all the Annex 13 for Indonesian Accident Investigator Committee. That what I like to have some comment on the Annex 13 is about, first of all, I like to share some difficulty during the investigation in Indonesia. That maybe in Annex 13 we can able to make some solution about because for the new aircraft, most of us don't have any experience of any knowledge. For example, that like the happened last year about the 737 MAX, that all the new system of the aircraft when we involved in the investigation, so it's very hard for us to get the information even from the manufacturer, because if we like to follow all the aircraft, especially the newly designed aircraft, with mostly is a computer flying aircraft, so we don't know the logic inside the aircraft, and then the information is very difficult. And then also, as you know now, is the black box have many parameters. It's about 1,000 parameters that sometimes it's very difficult to understand each parameter. But how the ICAO can facilitate us as accident investigator to have some knowledge from the new aircraft, maybe that ICAO can have some introduction of new aircraft or new technology for us as accident investigation. I think the Annex 13 and also the ICAO doc about the aircraft accident investigation training and procedure is, I think, is very adequate, and we always follow the updating of the manual. But it is many times that I like to have some solution about underwater black box recovery. we have many time experience underwater black box recovery, but as you know that underwater recovery is very expensive. So if in Annex 13 we know that the state of occurrence is responsible for the investigation, including the black box recovery. But there's any idea how we can get the support of the fund for the underwater recovery? For example, that now in Indonesia we have some regulation that Indonesian registered aircraft should insure the accident investigation costs. So I think for the foreign aircraft having accident in Indonesia and then happen in the, let's say on the sea, that we have to recover the black box, it will very difficult for us, because if I will use our government budget, but it is a foreign aircraft, we have very difficulty. But if it happen like Silk Air in the Musi River, it is very difficult for us to conduct the black box recovery. Maybe if possible that ICAO can make some regulation or make some mandatory for the aircraft operators should make some insurance for the underwater operation of the aircraft accident investigation, something like that, is to help us to find the solution about who will pay the cost for underwater recovery of the black box or the wreckage. Another thing that the idea that maybe the black box should be redesigned in such a way that if the black box is immersed in the water, and the black box should be able to float and should able to have some beacon, so we can find the black box easily. But for example, that like we have the accident in Indonesia about Adam Air. The aircraft is accident at the sea, with the depth of the water is about 2,000 meters. It is very difficult for us to do the operation like that, because it's cost very expensive, and also that need special equipment. So in this case, if the black box is able to float and also having the beacon, so we can easily to find the black box. It is the maybe as my suggestion to ICAO to put another concern about the black box. Another thing that during the black box recovery, most of the ULB is detached from its black box. So it is make very difficult. Sometimes we can find the ULB, but we could not find the black box, because it's black box and the ULB is separate from each other. So I think it is my comment on the Annex 13 about our difficulty. Maybe you in Montreal can discuss about our difficulty and what is the solution for the next future. Maybe it is all my comment. Thank you, the moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suryanto. Very challenging comment, Pak. The next response, I'm inviting Pak Uditito from Indonesia DGCA. Pak Uditito, for the 15 minutes, the meeting is yours.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Good morning, Montreal. Hello, Pak Andre. Thank you very much, Pak Alcancena. Thank you for your presentation. It's very good presentations about regarding for the Annex 13. I have a comment about the first about the definitions of the accidents. Yes, in the field, in the actual implementation, it's very difficult because I think the definition of accidents is introduced since I joined as the authority. It's still they have definition, the same definition, substantial damage and others. So it's just in my opinion, I think this can you make it more detailed, or state can be the tail of the definition. For examples, some state define the substantial damage related with the dollars for the repairs, for examples, not for the only substantial damage. They state the number of the spend money need to be to repair, for example. Also, some state define the many persons injured, not only more specific. So the question is, if there some state define the new definitions, more detailed about definitions, it need to be it is according to the ICAO, or we need to submit it, the differences to the ICAO. This is the comment over the definitions. Also, I have also comment for the safety recommendations. Since in Indonesia we have clear for the which one the investigation authority, and then we have also the state aviation authority. The investigation authority is already conduct the investigation and issue the final report. This is include the safety recommendation. There are some recommendation to state aviation authority. Some they have recommendation for the operators, and then they have recommendation for designs, organization, others. So the question is who is responsible to ensure the implementations of all safety recommendations apply for the operator, for example, because it's very this is still in Indonesia have the issue that the state aviation authority, which one the organization responsible to conduct the oversight of the operators, need to ensure all of the investigation authority safety recommendation is already implementation to the operators, or the operator need to submit to the investigation directly to the investigation authority to define that the implementations is adequate or not. That's the other issue I want to make it. Maybe you can give the information about this one, your experience. The third things, I just comment when for the ICAO, when the ICAO introduced the Annex 19, the state safety management. They also the accident investigation is part of the safety program. Okay, safety program. So I remember that the Annex 13 previously have the mandate the state have the prevention. So we still discussion when we develop the state safety program, which one sometimes is part of the state aviation authority, is include for the prevention, include for the to analyze the mandatory and the other report. So, so just to make it clear, when the aircraft investigation is already as part of the safety program, so the function of the analysis data to prevention is belonging for the normally state aviation authority, or still have the investigation authority can conduct the
Oops.
Mr. Tito, are you still there? Okay.
Seems like we
Pak
lost.
Tito, are you still on the mute mode, Pak? Okay.
No, actually, I already on the mute. Everybody,
Okay, Pak.
you can hear Pak Sena?
Ya, Pak, loud and clear, Pak.
Pak Antasena? Pak?
Pak, loud and clear, Pak.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think, sorry about this traffic. Okay, I think I have a comment for the this presentations. I hope I have the further explanation from the Andre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Tito.
Hello, Pak
Such
Antasena.
challenging presentations, and I think it's good input also. For the third respondent, we are inviting for Captain Nur Cahyo, which is, I believe, he is a friend, a colleague of Dr. Andre. Captain Nur Cahyo Utomo is head of investigations subcommittee in Indonesia NTSG. So, Captain Nur Cahyo Utomo, for the 15 minutes, the meeting is yours, Pak. Pak Nur Cahyo, you're still on mute, Pak.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and good morning, Andre. Thank you for the presentation. And thank you for describing the ICAO Annex 13. I will not comment that much, but Indonesia, as the member of the ICAO, as the contracting state of ICAO, we try to comply with the Annex 13. Some of the standards described in the Indonesian law, the Aviation Act, and some of them are described in the Ministry Decree or the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations. And we also have established independent investigation authority since 1997, I believe. And you described some of the upcoming amendment of the ICAO Annex 13, but you didn't mention about the determining of the serious incidents. As I aware that in the upcoming Annex, new amendment of the Annex, there will be a new way of determining serious incidents. And since the ICAO distribute the state letter for proposal of the amendment of the Annex, we agree for the proposal, but then we have a discussion. I mentioned, on, I think 3 times on the Asia Pacific AIG meeting, that the new standard will be very subjective to determine the serious incident. So I propose that ICAO should required to have a workshop or like training on how to determine the serious incidents. And last time before the pandemic, I think it was in February, I met Nicholas Rallo in Bangkok, and once again I asked him to, if possible, the ICAO have a workshop or training about this new ICAO standard. And gladly that in next October, the Asia Pacific ICAO office in Bangkok will have a workshop for this new how to determine the serious incident based on this new ICAO standard. And by complying to the ICAO Annex, we have a lot of investigation, yes, but then if I look at my database, that the trend of the accident or serious incident in Indonesia is decreasing, so it's a good news that because of the investigation, the recommendations, and then the number of accident and serious incident decreasing. And for other participants, I can say that maybe in back in 2012, 2013, we heard on the news that all during the wet season in Indonesia, a lot of case of aircraft on runway excursion. But recently, on this recent years, like last year and 2018, 2019, gladly that we didn't have that much case of runway excursion. So that's the indication of the improvement. And I'm not saying that this is the part of NTSC. This is not only part of the NTSC. It is the effort of everyone in the aviation stakeholders, the regulators, the operators, and airport. So everyone in the aviation stakeholders participate on how to improve the safety. So the decreasing of number of the occurrence is not only the part of the NTSC, it's everyone's success. So that's what I want to say. So thank you for the presentation. I hope this is a good message for all the participants. That's how this international standard. And I would like to say here that Indonesia comply to the standard. Maybe not all of them. We have one or two differences, but basically we have complied to this ICAO standard, and the result is good improvement to the safety record of Indonesia. I think that's all, Pak Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Nur Cahyo. Some message for Dr. Andre. I saw 18 questions in a question and answer columns that I believe that you may to respond also. And we still have another two respondents. Pak Cucu Suryo. Selamat malam, Pak Cucu. Are you still there? Okay. Pak, you are still in the mute mode, Pak. Okay. I'm inviting Pak Cucu to give some response from the IQS presentations. Pak Cucu, the meeting is yours, Pak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afel Sena. The first one, I have a question with regards to the, again, definition of the serious incidents. It's about 20 years ago already. Actually, the definition is only divided by two parts, the accident and the incidents. In between, there are serious incidents. And the definition of the serious incident, when I was active in the Civil Aviation Authority, is the one who are not included in the definition of the accident and the incident. So it is very important for us to have more clear the definition of the serious incident. The second one, the serious incident is not part of the job of the authority or the aircraft accident incident investigation 20 years ago, but right now, or about 10 or 15 years ago, is part of the responsibility of the authority to make a report to the IU. Are there any special reasons so that why the ICAO need not only the accident, but also the serious incident. Although the definition is still a question. The third question of me is regarding the final report on the para 6.16, if I'm not mistaken. Before we make a final report, we have to make a draft of final reports. My question is on the paragraph 161. It is related to the final report or of the draft of the final report, or the two of them. Thank you very much, Pak Avincena, for the time you have given to me.
Thank you, Pak Cucu. It's very challenging question, Pak. And I believe Dr. Andi still busy making some notes of those questions. And the last respondent, I'm inviting Pak Heruyanto Setioso. Please, Pak Heru, the meeting is yours.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Andre, Pak Safen. Juga selamat malam untuk Bapak-bapak semua dan Ibu yang ada di Indonesia. My question to Mr. Andre is the aeroplane with a maximum takeoff weight more than 2,250 kilogram. What happened is the accident at the rotor wing of the helicopter with the weight is the maximum takeoff weight is more than 2,250 kilogram. And the second question is about the light airplane, especially for the trainer airplane and the flying school, because the flying school is the basic for the, not only for the pilot, also for the people who work in the aviation industry. And I'm afraid that it's happened in the flying school because the airplane maximum takeoff weight is less than 2,250 kilogram. Is not covered by the ICAO. So can you give me the way how to solve the problem in the flying school, especially? Because flying school, I said that is the basic, but the people who work in the, especially for the pilot. I think that is my question. Thank you very much. And have a good night. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Heru. Very challenging questions. And for Dr. Andre, if you don't mind, please make all of the response, all of the, if you have plenty of time, of course, make it everything is become a compact statements. Question and answer from the question and answer column, and all of the respondents' statement, please give any resumes in 30 minutes. So it is, I believe it is not easy for you, but we are going to give you some more space time for tomorrow, the session to give some more explanations for all of these statement and questions of these respondents. Okay, I believe it is not easy for you. Okay, the meeting is yours, Mr. Andre.
Okay. So I'll just take each one as it came along. So to start off with the ICAO to facilitate knowledge of new aircraft. Well, usually what happens there is that new aircraft is and new introductions and so on. What we do find is that it'll be very difficult for ICAO to be able to arrange these kind of things. But usually what happens is in associations like ICAO and so on, there would be information exchanges in terms of new aircraft accidents and what happened during accident investigations when this happened. On the other hand, the annex makes provision for accredited representatives, and the accredited representative brings along the advisor. And the advisor is the person from the manufacturer or whatever the case might be to bring this information of new aircraft and new kinds of designs and so on. And that's how the annex address having information directly related to the aircraft to be shared in the investigation. And that works pretty well. It had worked pretty well in the past. If there's a problem in this line, we can always somehow address it through the accident investigation panel. For underwater recovery, support, and so on, what we found, and I'm talking about what I've seen in the past 10 years or so, is that usually what happens is it could either be that the state of registry or the state of design or the state of operator or so will also assist during this investigation to be able to do these recoveries. I know, for example, France has assisted the islands out. What was the islands? They assisted that investigation to be able to recover the some of the wreckage and also the flight recorders. So there's usually some kind of assistance. Furthermore, the ICAO also in the annex and in other documentation suggest that states would come into a regional accident investigation authority. No, sorry, I got it wrong. That states would form up into regional accident and incident investigation organizations. And we've seen several of that happen all over the world so far. And one of the latest ones is down in South America, where that group of states came together, and they don't call it a regional accident and incident investigation organization. They call it some different name to it. But it's an agreement between that states to assist each other during investigations, and in that way, states could be assisted by this kind of arrangements. Flight recorders designed to float. Well, there's the development is already there, and it's been captured in some of the ICAO guidance material, and that's got to do with the let me step back a bit. After the problematic searches for Air France and 447 and MH370 and so on, in those times, there was the developments in terms of a floatable, automatic, deployable flight recorder. Now, this is not actually that new. It's been around for quite a while. The Canadians developed it many years ago as a floatable or automatic deployable ELT, emergency locating transmitter, because they lost several airplanes into the water and couldn't find it. And you know, Canada's got huge amounts of water around. So it's been around. It's just been further developed into not only a ELT, but also a flight recorder that would deploy as the airplane impact, and or if the airplane sinks in the water, it will deploy. So that kind of technology is available. At the moment, there's also a lot of talk about transmitting certain sets of information. So there's the what is called the GADS, the Global Aviation Distress Systems, and there's a manual that's just been released, which is Doc 10054, and I'll touch on to it tomorrow in my talk about the guidance material, and that's typically either one or the other. The operator may either fit an automatic deployable flight recorder, or it may choose to do the transmission of data. And in that way, the position of the last impact of the airplane will be much better known. It'll be much more accurately known. And in that way, it'll be easier to find the actual wreckage, and then obviously the flight recorders. Underwater locating beacons getting detached, yes, we're aware of that, and there's standards being revised in terms of the attachment of these underwater locating beacons to the actual flight recorders. I know that there's tests being done in Europe in terms of the underwater locating beacons and the detachment and the attachment and so on of those. Obviously, if there's a automatic deployable flight recorder, it would be very nice, because then the ELT is built into this deployable recorder, and whether it deploys on land or on sea, that emergency locating transmitter will trigger and assist with finding the flight recorder. Let me just get down. I'm trying to pick up all. I took notes, and it's sometimes a bit difficult to keep up with all the notes. The definition in terms of accident, substantial damage, or number of persons, and the way states interpret that, I think that the main points that one has to catch in that is that with occurrence having a fatality or serious injury, and there's a definite definition to serious injury, that's definitely an accident. On the other hand, if there's substantial damage or destroyed of the airplane, that's an accident. And that goes from the largest to the smallest airplane out. That's the case. Once one gets to the details of serious incidents and so on, I do understand that it becomes very careful, can I say, consideration on how to categorize those. Safety recommendations, who's responsible? Well, the safety recommendations, if I just read, and this is the thing about accident investigations, that I'm just going to get it here quickly, and we pointed it out on other occasions too. As a safety recommendation is a proposal of an accident investigation authority based on the information derived from an investigation made with the intention of preventing accidents and incidents, and in which in no case has the purpose of creating a presumption of blame or liability and so on. So the main thing that we have to remember is a safety recommendation is a proposal. And that safety recommendation, writing it up, and sharing it with the other organization or with whoever it's addressed to is very important part. And you'll see that in the investigation guidance material, there's a whole section attempting to assist structuring safety recommendations in a good way to be able to bring the message through that this is serious stuff and you need to take care of it. But as we know it, and all over the world it happens, that a safety recommendation from the Accident Investigation Authority is not always accepted in the, can I call it, the CAA or the other authorities. And that has been for a long time. And one can see even the large states, not all safety recommendations addressed from the Accident Investigation Authority is eventually implemented. Sometimes it's implemented in a different way. Sometimes it's not implemented. And that's sad, but it's true. It does happen. So for ICAO, this is what the annex say, and that's what we have to stand on. Annex 19 in terms of the state safety program, and this is an interesting interaction, because Annex 19 and Annex 13 is two different bits of the big safety plan of the state. So Annex 19 deals with safety management. Annex 13 deals with the Accident Investigation Authority investigating accidents and incidents. Now, in the state, there needs to be a agreement on accidents and serious incidents is, according to Annex 13, a requirement for the Accident Investigation Authority to investigate these. That's according to the Annex. When it comes to incidents, that is an agreement in the state. Who's going to investigate that? And one can see different examples of that. Some states, the investigating authority does investigation of incidents too, to a certain level. And then the rest is left over for the operator, the aerodrome operator, the traffic management, and so on, to do that investigations in their safety management system. But in other cases, for example, and I'm referring to NTSB, for example, the US NTSB, certain of the accidents even is left for the FAA to do investigations. So the NTSB would do certain investigations and the FAA would do the other investigations. But that's a sake for in the state to get that balance. The requirement for the annex is that all accidents needs to be investigated. And that is a fairly important point that needs to be taken care of. For serious incidents, yes, I agree. There's a fair amount of talk about serious incidents and how to classify serious incidents and what would really be a serious incident and so on. And this is the accident investigation panel had the same discussion. Actually, most of that proposal came from Australia to do the judgment in terms of the way it's described there at the moment, to use the I'm just quickly having a look here in terms of the defenses and what's limited and what's effective and all the rest, and how that's done. This methodology is much wider than what is in the attachment C. Attachment C it's condensed and it's put in a very basic mode. But yes, I agree. It could be interesting to have this workshop and to be able to work more in terms of what the classification is. And in your case, you're in the APEC region, so you can also drag in Australia there to assist with that. And it's great, Captain Utama. It's great to hear that your trends is decreasing. I do keep an eye on accidents and incidents happening all over the world, and I notice that you have a challenging area that flying is done in, and it's great for the runway excursions to decrease. Further, if I go further down, let me just see. Mrs. Supro, so I think your question about the serious incidents was more or less the same, where you want more clarity in terms of serious incidents. The annex is very clear in terms of the fact that serious incidents above 2,250 there needs to be an investigation for that serious incidents. The state needs to institute an investigation, and that's a standard. And there's also a recommendation for the state to institute an investigation even on the lighter airplanes for serious incidents. Okay, let me just try and follow this through. I didn't totally get the question on the final reports. I do find that final reports, yes, draft final reports needs to be coordinated with all the participants. There's a question on how long, 60 days and so on and so on. I didn't totally get the 161. I'm not sure how that relates to each other.
616.
Is it 616?
Yes. It's referred to the final reports or the draft of final reports or two of them.
I got a 6.1, but I don't have a 6.16.
6.1, what's that? Probably 6.1.
6.1. Oh, so that's that's a recommendation that's a recommendation to the format of the final report in Appendix 1.
In Appendix 1, yeah.
Okay, so but
it's referred to the draft of final reports or referred to the final reports.
Yeah.
Or the two of them.
So the recommendation is that the state should use the format of the final report as in Appendix 1 to structure the reporting. So yes, Appendix 1 do give a certain format of the final report to be able to have it in a good structure, but there's also some states that do a shorter version of this. For example, in the case of that spilling of the fluid on the cabin attendant, that was a shorter version of the final report format that they used, because you don't need to have all the other information in it, and so that happens from state to state. But it's a recommendation. It's not a standard. It says that should use that format. it makes it easier for other states to understand the final report if the final report is written in that format, because then certain things comes in certain places, which makes it easier to then understand. And that's why that is proposed like that. Then there was a question on helicopters, and what I could understand from the question is that some helicopters with a mass of more than 2,250 kilograms. Now that is included that's included in the serious incidents, but all helicopters needs to be investigated. Let me just go back to applicability. The annex is applicable to all accidents and incidents wherever they occur. So that's kind of the applicability of that. And your question about the light aircraft, that's also covered under Annex 13. There needs to be an investigation carried out. The reporting to ICAO is at the higher level of mass. So ICAO would be flooded with final reports and notifications and all the rest if the requirement is for all aircraft accidents to be reported to ICAO. But the annex require all accidents, I mean aircraft accidents. There could also be other accidents, but it requires all aircraft accidents to be investigated. Now, I do have to point out that, yes, all accidents to be investigated, but then we do have the provision that if the authority deems it not viable to investigate this because of the amount of safety information that will be deemed from this investigation, it may have a, can I call it a lighter investigation and not a full Annex 13 investigation. And that's the provision to assist in terms of I'm just trying to get this point. I had it here before me, but anyway, I'll come back to it. But that's the idea, that it depends on the safety information that one would be able to deem from this investigation when the investigation is carried out. Afan, that's about all the questions that I have here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Andre. Thank you for your explanations. It might be still triggering a lot of more questions, but we have time limits here. So to all the participants, you may go to your electronic mails that all of the documents sent to your emails, and you may search more explanations on that documents. You can say annex document and ICAO circulars there. So before we completing this webinar, I'm inviting the President of CSAS, Mr. Wisnu Daryono Tlodo-Utomo, to give your conclusion remarks. Pak Wisnu, the meeting is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Afen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam Indonesia. Good morning Montreal. Distinguished speakers, Dr. Andre de Kock, honorable respondents, Dr. Suryanto Cahyono, Bapak Nur Cahyo Utomo, Bapak Cucuk Suryo, Bapak Herianto Setioso, moderator Pak Avensena, CSAS team, as well respectful webinar participants. The principle of civil aviation operations in accordance with the 1944 Chicago Convention is to develop of international civil aviation with the goal of safe, secure, expedite, orderly flow of air traffic on the basis of equality of opportunity, operated properly and economically, and therefore it's not surprising that ICAO's core mandate is to help states achieve uniformity in civil aviation regulation, standard, procedure, organization as high as possible to achieve such goals as outlined in 19 annexes. It is Annex 13 of 19 annexes are published by ICAO based on the procedure set out in the Chicago Convention to investigate aircraft accident and incident, where there are several items of amendment that need to be considered by state related to aircraft accident incident investigation. It has become a common understanding that accident or incident is not our will. However, we must conduct a comprehensive, thorough, and systematic investigation to find the root cause to be studied together so that similar cases do not happen again in the future. Many things still raise questions. Many things need further discussion, and that is why this discussion is held so that we can discuss directly with the experts. We also have good news from very competent expert, Captain Nur Cahyo tonight, that accident in Indonesia decreases significantly, not because the pandemic, but because the compliance of safety standard. Therefore, tomorrow night is the right time, a very good opportunity to raise a lot of questions to the expert to get the answer so that we get a good and comprehensive understanding of the issue of aviation accident incident investigation, especially for Indonesia. This discussion will continue tomorrow, which is certainly more exciting at the same time as today. That's why we hope we all remain present for tomorrow night. Tomorrow, after this discussion is over, CSAS Indonesia will submit via email to each of the webinar participants Annex 13 and all related documents issued by ICAO for further study. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Wisnu Daryono, for the conclusion remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for participation for this first sessions of the webinar. As mentioned by Pak Wisnu, tomorrow we are going to conduct the next webinar. CSS, please show the second session's webinar agenda. So tomorrow we are going to present the topic of review on ICAO and Annex documents and circular related to the aircraft accident and incident investigations. All of the documents as mentioned and circulars sent to your electronic mail for the further discussions. Again, ladies and gentlemen, to Dr. Andre, I have just texted by CSS that most participants are still hoping for you for the second sessions tomorrow to give some resumes 10 minutes for the questions and TA. CSS are going to resume all the questions and send to you right away through the email. Again, gentlemen, all the participants, panelists, thank you very much for your comings. May we see you again in the second webinar tomorrow. Selamat malam and good morning from Montreal.
Bye.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Sawen. Thank you Mr. Andre. Have a
Terima
good
kasih, Pak
day.
Andre.
Because,
Tomorrow.
Thank you, Andre.
in Canada.
Thank you, Andre.
Okay, we'll see you.
Terima kasih Pak Nur.
Sama-sama Pak, terima kasih Pak.
Malam Pak Udi, selamat malam Pak Cucu.
Selamat malam, sampai
Terima
ketemu
kasih.
lagi.
Lagi.
Selamat malam Bu Mariati.
Malam Pak Wisnu.
Bu Mariati,
Saya dengar
Pak
aja
Wisnu,
sebagai
selamat malam.
pendengar yang baik. Malam Pak Cucu.
Terima kasih Pak Wisnu.
Interest ini Pak,
Sampai
interest
jumpa
buat
besok.
nambah ini, nambah refresh.
Tambah, iya. Banyak beberapa yang mungkin juga informasi-informasi yang berubah, yang update.
Iya, yang update ya.
Iya.
Oke, aku besok lagi ikut lagi. Oke.
Pamit dulu
See you,
Pak.
bye-bye.
Sampai
Pamit
besok.
dulu ya. Ya, selamat besok.
Terima kasih.
Sama-sama Pak Nur. Ya, baik.
Terima kasih, Bu.
baik.
Terima kasih Pak
Baik.
Pen, Pak Wisnu, Pak
Pak
Heru.
Fen, makasih Pak
Pak
Fen.
Siap.
Pak TV.
Ya,
Oke.
Pak Nur Cahyo, thank